kill me.
Oh, yeah. Woo. Didn't need help with the tab.
2 in a row.
Woo, woo.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm so proud of me.
Welcome to Movie Boners, everybody. Ooh, that's tasty.
Oh, I like that. Oh.
What do you have over there?
Well, I always try to find beer that'll be somewhat relevant to the episode, right?
Right.
Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I like that one. Well, I found one that honestly, dude, I don't think there is a more relevant beer or like anything. I think I hit it. Okay. I am drinking Kung Fu Robot IPA.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yes, it's out of a brewery down here in Austin. It's Fourth Tap Brewing. And this is a tasty IPA. I think you would dig this one quite a bit, man.
Yeah? Okay. That's interesting. It's also interesting you said that you thought yours was the most relevant because I will challenge you on that.
Oh, shit!
Mine is even more relevant than that, and it is also old school.
Unless you are drinking something that's like Enter the Dragon or Jackie Chan as a master, I still win. Well,
I'm drinking an imported premium lager from the Tsingtao Brewery is established in 1903, brewed and canned by the Tsingtao Brewery in Qingdao, China. It is crafted using malted barley, hops, yeast, and pure mountain water for a crisp, refreshing beer. It's a lager cerveza that's pretty darn good, but it's Chinese, legit, old school.
What is it called?
It's just the imported premium lager.
Oh, no! I still win! Screw you! I still win!
I was pretty shocked. I found it. The one Chinese beer in my liquor store.
Yep. I mean that's pretty awesome. Good. Say the name of the city again.
Qingdao. Qingdao.
And what was the other?
The name of the brewery is Tsingtao. Tsingtao.
I'm going to challenge you. Try to say it without raising the pitch of your voice.
Tsingtao. But it's good.
Yeah.
Right. It's an ancient Chinese secret recipe.
I still win this one because.
Yeah, whatever. All right.
Yep, you know it to be true.
So, before we get into this episode, 2 housekeeping things. 1, we have a merch store. If you want merch, you can feel free to do that.
Buy some cool swag.
Super duper discounted as a thank you to our early fans on. It takes a little bit for things to ship. The stuff I ordered about a week ago just shipped, so my hoodie is en route. I'm very excited. And then, so that's about all there is to say about that. The other thing, have you been watching anything new lately besides Kung Fu?
No.
Okay, I kind of have. So I got caught up on Yellowstone, and I'm very sad about that. Also finished Friends, and so we're trying to find new shows to watch. I tried watching How I Met Your Father for about 5 minutes and then bailed on it. And then,
I'm very weary of that one.
Yeah, it was mundane, at least in the little bit I tried to watch. But I started watching on Netflix Archive 81.
Oh, okay.
Which I think James Wan produced it. It's like a horror series.
Okay.
And it's pretty cool. It's interesting. I like it a lot.
That one
it's about like a guy that restores old videotapes, and it has like a Ex Machina feel to it, where he kind of gets brought in by this guy to restore these mysterious tapes. And then he watches them, and it's kind of like a found footage thing, partly.
Oh, cool.
Most of it's not, but there's a little bit of found footageness. It was cool. I liked it.
Yeah, it keeps popping up on my like homepage of Netflix, and hey, you might like this, and I'm like, I might,
Yeah.
but I'm still like watched a lot of like kung fu martial arts stuff. Watched a bunch of. My daughter and I watched Camp Cretaceous on Netflix. We just finished that, and then I'm also watching Friends because that's what you do when you're a 30-year-old who grew up watching Friends. Is you keep watching Friends.
Right. Right.
I do have a funny little story regarding our merch.
Okay.
And our show name. So our show name has been like one of the funniest things. Like it just
it always makes me laugh.
She already knows the story I'm going to tell. So my daughter has wanted like the stickers. She's wanted a hoodie since I showed her, hey, our merch store's out. But I haven't really wanted to buy her one because I'm like, you're not going to be allowed to wear it to school.
Right.
You'll get in trouble. And I don't know, like it'd be awesome if she wore like our brand outside, right? But that might raise a few eyebrows.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, my lovely daughter has not. She's learned a lot being like 12 years old, but she hasn't learned everything.
Everything. Yeah.
Well,
birds and the bees.
Yeah. Well, she learned some of that stuff, but she tried telling her mother that she wanted a hoodie from us and that we had a merch store and that she wanted to wear it. And her mother was like, hold up. She was like, do you know what their name is and like what the joke behind the name is? And Monica was like, no. And so her mother explained to her the joke and the word and all that. My daughter is in the car with me. We're driving back after dinner Thursday. And she goes, Dad, I don't think I want a hoodie anymore. I was like, oh, all right, that's cool. That's cool. What changed your mind? And she goes real quiet. And I was like, you found out what the name is, like what it means, didn't you? And she goes, yes. Why do you have that name? And she was like, why does it have to be like that? It's so bad. It's so embarrassing. And I was like, are you ready? She goes, yeah. And I'm like, Christy came up with that name. And she goes, what? No.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
And now my daughter is like, she does not want to like acknowledge the podcast name.
Yeah.
It's that's hilarious.
So to be young and embarrassed by things again.
Yeah. And right as I started telling that story, she looked up at me with that look of like, Dad.
Don't do it.
And that's my fun little story. I thought it was super funny.
Yeah, I love that.
She was like, can you come up with something that would be appropriate for me? It's like, we'll try to figure something out.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll figure something out. A family-friendly merch. That's a good idea. Okay.
Oh, man.
Well, today's episode, I'm very excited for. We've been both very excited for weeks, months maybe.
Yeah, this should be an interesting one because there's so many. Did you find... So there were some where I was like, oh, there's not as much like kung fu or martial arts, any of that, as I remember there being.
Yeah.
So I'm holding a handful off that I feel you would expect me to have on the list, but I'm holding them back for when we do like a foreign film. Because they'll probably end up on my foreign film list. Yeah,
because it's more of a foreign or dramatic film that happens to have some martial arts in it. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I noticed that too watching them there once. I was like, I love this movie. I love this. And I was like, there's long stretches of this movie with no kung fu happening, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's also when you get into the kung fu mood, you're like, I just want some kung fu. Like I want nonstop as much as possible. I had a difficult time ranking them specifically because I think martial arts films to me is a unique genre because I love all of them so
Yeah.
much, and I can watch anything. Like I don't care if it's like an epic period piece type movie or just a badly dubbed 70s B movie. Like I like all of it. And so finding like which one do I like more than the other one was hard.
Dude, I had a hard time ranking mine. I also found myself like I sat down. If you haven't caught on, we're doing like it's all kung fu martial arts stuff.
Yeah.
I was like immediately like, well, obviously I'm gonna have a ton of Jackie Chan, a ton of Jet Li. Like
Yeah.
this is happening, and then I sat down and rewatched a bunch of Jet Li like solo films,
Mhm.
and he made really bad movies in like the early 2000s. One of them I really enjoyed. Like it was really cool. I hadn't seen it since it came out. I really enjoyed it. But I felt kind of bad because I was like, oh, I don't know that I'm going to have Jet Li actually featured on my list.
Yeah.
You'll find out if I do or not. But
Okay.
yeah,
I had the same thing. I was like, I had to limit myself to only 2 Jackie Chan movies because if I didn't, this would be a top 10 Jackie Chan list, and that's not what we were going for.
Well, I think that's funny that you limited yourself to only 2 because so did I.
Nice. We're on the same page. Yeah, I tried to also do the thing that I do before where I tried to represent the different periods that were impactful to me, the different actors and creators that were impactful to me, and just who I like and what I like the most. And it was also difficult because following in our normal, somewhat rule thing, I didn't list a bunch of movies I've already talked about, like The Raid and The Raid 2 and Warrior and Hero and Equilibrium and all these movies. I was like, okay, so that takes a lot of the heavy hitters off my list. But I still have a lot of heavy hitters.
I have a lot. I tried like compiling a list that like full of movies that I watch more frequently or movies that really like struck me. I have one on here that I am excited to mention because it's one that I haven't told you I've seen. And I'm excited for you to hear that one.
Yeah.
And then I've got a couple surprises on my list. I know that. But I was like, this was an interesting one because I didn't want to... Obviously, I wasn't going to include like The Matrix because that was already featured a couple times now. I didn't want to feature like The Raid 2 because I feel that one has more martial arts in it than the first one does.
Yeah.
And I'll say right now, The Raid is not on my list. That was another one where I was like, I felt honestly after rewatching it again, I was like, this one works a little bit better as just a like foreign film, like an international kind of film. Plus, it was hard to bump a couple of mine off of my list that I knew weren't going to be on there. But yeah, this was like I've watched a lot of kung fu movies, and it was fun revisiting some of them because I haven't watched them for some time, and I got big. Man, I was grinning from ear to ear with I was, oh my God, this is so much better than I remember. And some of them put me right back to like the first time I saw it where it was so different and like just the style of martial arts, which was another thing that I kind of learned to appreciate more this time around was like the martial arts isn't just all the fight sequences, but it's also like movies that feature prominently in the like mentality, like the discipline, the peacefulness of it, or treating it more of like a dance instead of just constant fighting. I thought that was a really interesting thing that I think I just kind of ignored at a younger age, but really appreciate now. So there's a lot to get into. It was, did you find yourself at one point this while watching all these, Jake, of being like, well, I think I need to go find like a dojo. I need to learn. I need to be the next Kung Fu master. Did you find yourself at all doing that?
Yeah. It took me back to being a kid where that was all I did, where I would watch Kung Fu movies and then I would spend all day or all week practicing that one move I saw Jackie Chan do. When I was a kid, I got pretty good. So in Rush Hour, it's not on my list, but in Rush Hour, there's this when he has the like steering wheels handcuffed to his arm, he like goes in and pulls that guy's belt off, and his gun falls down, and then he pops the gun up with his foot and grabs it in the air. I had like a little like squirt gun in a holster, and I like did that flip up thing with the gun. I got pretty good at that when I was a kid, and it made me like wonder if I still have it in me.
Did you try it, Jake?
No, I didn't try it. I didn't want to disappoint myself.
Yeah, I will say I've been doing a lot of the so my daughter and I always like goof around and just fuck around together, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I have found myself in the last 2 weeks doing a lot of like hayas and karate chops and telling her like ninja moves that I'm gonna do to take her down. And I'm like, man, I'm like a busted up mid-30s guy. I have a hard time sitting on the floor for 5 minutes and then getting back up.
I know, it's catching up with us.
Me thinking that I'm going to be this amazing kung fu dude, just no.
Yeah. But all of those mundane things, like you watch enough Jackie Chan movies and he does mundane things like answer the phone in the coolest way.
Dude.
He's flipping things. He's making like whatever he's doing. He's flipping things around, and it made me want to just do that constantly.
But you know that you're just not flexible enough for that kind of shit.
And freaking Jackie Chan was like 41 when he finally made a big American movie. He wasn't even a big star in America until he was 41.
Even like some of his movies that take place outside of China, whether it's in Australia or the States, San Francisco or whatever. Even those are still dubbed. Like they're still Chinese films.
Yeah. And he's like 40s and 50s doing all his own stunts, and it definitely makes me feel uncoordinated and all that stuff.
Yep. Yeah, watching him he in his super young days, watching him do this like trick where he's hanging upside down and collecting water out of like these two barrels and then folding them like it's the craziest sit up ever, and he folds himself in half to empty 2 little teacups into another absolutely bonkers watching him do this stuff. And you're like, man, like I can't even sit up straight from a laying down position. I have to do this awkward like groaning roll push where you hear every joint pop.
I'm not sitting up straight, sitting in this chair. I have to do that for too long. I'm like, oh, this is exhausting.
Right. I try. I'm like, all right, good posture. No.
Yeah, fuck it.
Well, we should get into that. I'm curious about your list. I'm sure you're curious about mine because I honestly
curious. You and I don't talk about Kung Fu that much, so I really don't know what you've seen, what you haven't, what you like, what you don't. So I'm so excited to find out.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be kind of a unique cluster of movies. I really do think that.
Okay, cool. I'm so excited.
Well, let's do this, man. I think you start this one off.
I can do that. So my number 10 probably is what the fuck am I trying to say?
I don't know.
Unexpected pick. Maybe not by you, maybe by anybody, because I don't think it was well received when it came out, but when I saw it in the theater, I was grinning ear to ear the whole time. I rewatched it. I'm like, this is still fucking cool. I don't care what anybody says. So it's my number 10, top 10 Kung Fu movie, Man with the Iron Fists.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from 2012.
I have never seen Man with the Iron Fist.
Okay.
But
yeah, I'm not surprised. It didn't get super well received when it came out. But
which is funny. Everyone that I know that has seen it absolutely loves it.
Yeah.
Like, don't have anything bad to say about it. It's one of those I've just never gotten around to watching.
Yeah, and I think you would like it. I think anybody that's a fan of Kung Fu movies like us would like it. It is directed by RZA, the leader of the infamous Wu-Tang Clan. And he he wrote the story. He co-wrote the screenplay with Eli Roth, and then also directed it and starred in it as like the blacksmith. And it's just like a love letter to fun, nostalgic 70s kung fu movies. And that's just kind of the whole point of it. Russell Crowe is fun in it. All of the like characters are kind of like caricatures. They're like a larger than life weird creature, like not creatures, but just like big personalities. And Russell Crowe plays like this guy named Jackknife, who has like a knife shaped like an old musket gun. He's like this English guy in China. And all of the like weapons and gore, especially, it's pretty like violent if you don't mind that kind of thing, which I know you don't. It's just a really, really cool action movie with good like imagery and style.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool. Lucy Liu's in it, Dave Bautista's in it. But it's a fun freaking movie.
Yeah, I've only heard good things about that movie, and it's just, I don't know why. I even told myself prepping for this, I was like, oh, I'm totally at least going to get this one watched, right? Mm-hmm. And then I didn't watch it. So if we ever do another episode of the like, hey, 10 movies we've never seen that we know we should, or I've always wanted to, that might be one that I end up watching. But yeah, I know I need to see it. Everyone that has just loves it. So I'm actually not shocked that's on your list, bud.
All right, cool.
Well, my number 10 is probably like one of the most famous. It's the only, I'm just double checking my notes. Come on, there you are. I just got to check. Yeah, I think my number 10 is the only like unanimously critically acclaimed, audience loved film on my list.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of the most beautifully shot films, and I have it on my list because when I saw it when it first came out 22 years ago, I was pretty young, and it just, the style of the fight scenes and just the beauty of it, kind of integrating like the peace of mind along with the fighting styles and kind of the principles of discipline and all this, really took me off guard when I was younger, and it's just kind of always stuck with me. So my number 10 is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It's just, I just love how it's shot, and I love the fighting style in the film, and I think the story is really cool. I really like with like martial arts films that take place in like the 19th century or old China or old world settings, where they show you the bigger than life, kind of the mythos of martial arts, how it's not just like humans, but it transcends the body and mind, or it can.
Yeah.
I like when that's kind of shown on the screen. So Crouching Tiger's just always stuck with me. It's kind of funny. It's like the only Ang Lee film that's ever really stuck with me. But it's a pretty good one. It's how I got to know Chow Yun-fat. I already knew Michelle Yeoh from Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah.
But it was cool seeing her in that kind of role of like Kung Fu masters and all this, and kind of all that principled lifestyle. So it's just one of the most beautiful martial arts films I've seen. So yeah,
Chow Yun-fat's the like one of two big names that I didn't fit on my list. And I've loved him since Hard Boiled. He's just a great, another kind of one of those athletic, awesome leads.
Yeah.
I need to revisit Crouching Tiger though, because I remember like not loving it when I first saw it, but I may have been in the wrong headspace where I expected it to be more actiony, and I remember it being more visually, beautifully poetic kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very, so I haven't watched it for a while, but it was one that I was like, I'm pretty sure this will be on my list because I've always had a very high respect for it. And when I rewatched it, I was like, it's a lot slower than I remember it being, but I really appreciated just the attention of detail to like kind of like I said, the principles of martial arts and the kung fu, and all the masters kind of having like this lore about all of them. I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I totally know what you mean. All right. My number 9 movie is a big one. Several of these are big ones, but it's one of those ones that I held in high esteem for a long time. I reference it a lot because it has one of the greatest mythical matchups of all time in it. And so if you are a Kung Fu fan, of course, you have to have seen The Way of the Dragon, Bruce Lee.
yeah.
And I reference it constantly because, especially as a kid, when you start getting into Kung Fu, everybody's like, especially if you were a kid in the 90s like us, and Chuck Norris was a big deal, and Walker Texas Ranger was the coolest show ever, but Bruce Lee was like the master. And so you had this argument with your peers, is Bruce Lee better or is Chuck Norris better, and who would win in a fight? And then when you discover that The Way of the Dragon exists, because you're a kid and it's a movie from 1972, so who knows about it? Once you discover that it exists, you're like, this documentary of Bruce Willis Bruce Lee fighting Chuck Norris proves that Bruce Lee would beat Chuck Norris, because he does in the film. Spoiler alert, by the way. That's the last fight in the movie.
Wow, Jake. Wow.
But it's a cool movie. I also found out this week, because I was like watching it and doing a little research on it, it was the only film that Bruce Lee ever finished directing. Like, he tried to direct several movies. He, of course, directed Game of Death, but died before he could finish it. So it's kind of his most complete movie from a directing perspective, I think. Or that's what they were saying, is that he was able to direct it completely, finish it, release it, all that good stuff before he passed away. So I thought that was really cool. And yeah, it's just a cool movie about a guy that goes to visit his family's restaurant in Italy and has to defend them from these gangsters, and uses kung fu to do it, and fights a very hairy Chuck Norris when he takes off his like shirt or karate uniform. He's a pretty hairy mother, that's for sure.
You know, I am so not surprised that you would have that movie on your list. And for those that know Jake the Bet, like close to him, this might be the one movie out of all the movies you've ever talked about that makes the most sense of why you're a fan.
I mean, it's Chuck Norris
now see,
and Bruce Lee.
I grew up just with the understanding of, when it comes to martial arts, there are the greats and then there are the wannabe greats. And I grew up in a household where it was like, there is never a debate between Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. It is straight Bruce Lee. I grew up in a house where it was like, Chuck Norris is kind of a joke. So, yeah.
Damn, son.
So, yeah. Unlike Jake, I always knew who would win in that fight. I mean, did you ever see Enter the Dragon? Come on.
I have several times. But Chuck Norris is not a joke. Chuck Norris is a cool guy. I will say, this was his very first movie. It was his screen debut. So, understandable. You know, he's at a disadvantage. He's the underdog in that fight against the great Bruce Lee. So, and Bruce Lee wrote and directed it. So, you know,
a little biasness.
Yeah, the scales are tilted a little bit in his direction.
I like how you're trying to come to the defense of Chuck Norris, and Chuck Norris is Chuck Norris. The dude is an icon. But yeah, I grew up in a home where it was like, oh, you're talking martial arts, unless it's Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee, there's no competition, at least during the 90s. And then, of course, Jet Li became famous and everyone was like, hold the phone. This guy's way too fast.
Yeah.
So funny. All right. Well, my number 9 is one that was not received well anywhere, but I love this movie. It's so bloody. It's so violent. Like, to the point where I laugh at some of the kill scenes. I get excited about some of the kill scenes because I know just how ridiculous they are. It's such a fun movie. I love this movie so much. My number 9 is Ninja Assassin.
Yeah.
I love the fights in this movie. I love the use of all the weapons and the whole like use of the shadows and their training and all the flashbacks. Just everything about this movie is so cool to me. And I totally get it's not a stellar movie. There was never award talk in it. They weren't setting out to make the next greatest thing you've ever seen. But it's so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I remember seeing it with a bunch of friends, like a bunch of dudes, and I just remember being like, "This movie is fucking awesome. This is
so fucking
it's
cool.
violent, it's cool. It doesn't it is what it is, and what it is fun, and it's a great time."
And it's all ninjas. It's all like, I love the flashback scenes of like their training and the rigorous stuff that they're like put through, the duels, all the sparring that they do. I think the part that I'm constantly just like, that is so fucked up, is them learning how to walk silently down the creaky hallway. And if they make a sound on the board that like purposely creaks, they have to lift their feet up and get it cut open with the bamboo stick. Like, that's just brutal.
Yeah.
But then they top that off where you're like, God, that's so like cringy. And then you see him like throwing thousands of ninja stars out of nothing. And it's just like tearing bodies up. Oh, it's so cool. I love Ninja Assassin. Like, I remember watching that movie and just, it was one of those where immediately I was like, yep, I'm going to watch this movie for the rest of my life. Like, that's just like, yep.
Yeah, and it may be partly nostalgia, at least on my part, where when I was a kid, as soon as you found out about ninjas, you were like, okay, so they're the best, and obviously the best is the coolest. So these other guys who do martial arts, they're cool, but ninjas are just perfect.
But ninjas were on a whole different level.
Yeah, they're untouchably cool. And so to have a movie that just focuses on the details of becoming a ninja, the brutality and the violence and like adult version of that, it's so cool.
Well, it's cool seeing like the weapons used in the manner that they are. Sure, it's all kind of terrible CGI, but fuck that. Yeah. It's so much fun.
Yeah. It's a good time.
It's such a good time.
All right. My number 8 movie is a different kind of movie. It's a different, at least from the ones we've talked about so far, but I like it a lot. And I don't even know how to lead into it. My number 8 movie is The Transporter, which is just like such a cool movie. When it first came out, especially before they made the sequels, I was like, this movie fucking rules. And it's directed by this like French guy, and it's Jason Statham, who's a white guy, and he's essentially just he's a transporter. He drives people and things around, and he's like Ryan Gosling from Drive, only cooler because he knows kung fu and stuff. And he like is so business oriented. He has these very specific rules that you don't change the deal, you don't use any names, and you don't open the package. And of course, he has to break all of his rules.
Well, right, because you wouldn't have a story without him breaking his own rules.
Yeah. So he breaks the rules and finds out his package is like a living human woman who's being trafficked, basically. And he decides to defend her because he's a hero and he's cool. And it has like just so many cool fights in it. The one that always stands out to me, though, is when he is in that garage and he pours the oil everywhere, and then he covers himself in the oil so he's all slippery, and then he breaks the pedals off of this bicycle and clips them onto his feet so he can like move through they can like walk through the oil without slipping, and has like these spiky weapons on his bottoms of his feet. And just that whole fight is so cool, and everything about the movie is cool. But Jason Statham has always just kind of exuded this cool
Well, that
factor.
was like, we knew Statham from, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels or Snatch. Like,
Guy
we
Ritchie
didn't know
movies.
him as a kung fu action star. We knew him as like the sarcastic British guy who cusses a lot and drinks a lot.
Right.
And then he like shows up in the transporter and just beats people's asses into the ground. So I wanted this on my list so bad. I was going to make it an honorable mention. But this was one where when I rewatched it this week, I was like, I remember there being so many, or at least I thought there were so many more fight scenes in the movie, but there's really only a couple big fight scenes. So I was kind of struggling, but I was like, I'll make it honorable regardless. Because that first transporter, fuck the sequels, but that first transporter is so cool. There is one thing about it that has always cracked me up. Okay. Right? So when he discovers that he's transporting the woman, you know, he cuts the hole in the duct tape so that she can drink a little bit of the orangina or whatever it is, the orange juice. Yeah. But I always laugh about this because he maintains the duct tape on her so that she can't scream, right? But he was going to get attacked regardless because as soon as they pull her out of the bag, they're going to be like, why is there a perfectly cut hole in the duct tape?
Yeah, you could take it off and put new tape on. That would be better.
Right. So I cracked up about it, when I saw it back in the theaters back in, when was that? 2002 or whatever?
Yeah.
Maybe exactly. 2001.
2002.
Bam.
Yeah. Oh, every time. It's crazy.
Every time it cracks me up. But Transporter is that's such a fun movie, dude. That's a good pick.
Yeah, I love it.
You only love it because he's shirtless and jacked. That guy is
He's quite jacked.
Fucking jacked in that movie.
I will say. He is quite jacked.
Well, my number 8, when it first came out in the 70s, was regarded as a very serious film, and there are still some very serious aspects of it. Of course, when I watched it as a kid, a lot of it made me laugh, and a lot of it has become kind of iconic when every male guy, whether they're a child or an adult, when they go to make kung fu moves, we all do the same sound effects. Yeah. And I really think it's because of this movie. You already brought up Bruce Lee, so I'm going to bring him up now too. Enter the Dragon is just such a cool movie. I love the story. I love the fight scenes are so badass.
Yeah.
But you can't help but laugh every time Bruce Lee goes to do anything, and it's always,
yeah. There is a lot of it. Obviously, I watched it this week. Obviously, it's on my list. But yeah, rewatching it, I was like, he does that sound a lot.
A lot during the movie. The movie's like just under 2 hours, and he might make that sound more than he has actual dialogue. But
my favorite is when it's like it's quiet. It's just like, it's so funny.
But yeah, Enter the Dragon is just... I remember not watching that until after I had watched a whole bunch of Jackie Chan stuff. And when I saw Enter the Dragon finally, that was like the fight scenes in that movie, I think, are set apart from like what Jackie Chan does, where Jackie Chan's style is more based on the utilizing of like props around him, the speed, the no stunt double kind of aspect. But he always throws a lot of physical comedy into his fight scenes. Whereas Bruce Lee's fight scenes were very like, no, this is a real spar. Like it looks like real sparring moves. But Enter the Dragon, and the storyline is just cool too. Sending this guy to go and take down a drug kingpin. Enter the Dragon is just, it's iconic. Like it really is, and it deserves to be iconic. Bruce Lee was a master at what he was doing. Can you imagine if like him, Jackie Chan, and Jet Li just ended up having a movie where even if Lee had lived long enough to even make like a fun cameo, maybe not an actual fight sequence, but just make a cameo, that would have been cool.
It'd
But
be
yeah,
cool to have like an Expendables style kung fu movie where it's just
right.
like full of legends. That would be
Of
crazy.
course, at this point in time, all of our legends are like old. They're all
Yeah.
like, yeah, we're not doing that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Like, no, sorry.
But yeah, Enter the Dragon, when I rewatched it this last week, I was like, fuck, man. Like,
Yeah.
I'm laughing when I shouldn't be, but at the same time, like, this is just such a cool movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're laughing because you're having a good time. It's
Oh,
an
yeah.
enjoyable movie. Even though the stakes are like high and taken seriously, it's fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll talk about more when it's on my list
Yep.
in some undisclosed position at this point. So my number 7 movie is my first Jackie Chan movie. I finally get to talk about
All right.
Jackie Chan.
All right.
My number 7 is Police Story.
All right.
Police Story. Police Story as a series is his biggest series, obviously. There's so many installments in it, and they're all enjoyable to different degrees. But the first Police Story, especially, I had to put on my list because for a lot of reasons. Number one, I think it shows what Jackie Chan's style as a director and a performer is, where he loves the filmmaking process. He focuses on the stunts, especially, and that's very obvious if you watch Police Story. If you watch Police Story, the story is pretty basic. It's about a guy who is a cop and he busts this like huge kingpin, tries to protect this one witness lady, and then goes to like rebust the guy after he gets out of.
Well, yeah, I mean, everything goes wrong for Jackie Chan's character. Everything goes wrong for him.
It's not a ton of things happen, but the best part about it is all of the. So it's directed by Jackie Chan. Obviously, it stars him, and I also love how in almost all of his movies, his character is named Jackie Chan, and so he just plays himself. It makes it very easy to follow. Who are you talking about? You're talking about Jackie Chan. I get it, but he focuses on, as a director and a performer, focuses on the stunts, and I think that Police Story is great, especially for that, because the stunts are crazy. After I had already like made my list, I was like, I went to Google and I was like, what do people think are the best stunts that he's ever done?
Dude,
and
he's done some insane stunts.
He does insane ones, but there were several that came specifically from Police Story, including like some of the top ones. And I was like, okay, so I feel completely justified.
Yeah.
He from like the very beginning has this scene where these cars are driving down a hill through a little village, like kind of like slum type village, but they're crashing through a bunch of stuff. And just the way it's shot, you can tell he's just like, this is a giant stunt that we're spending a bunch of money and time on. We're going to get it right. And they just focus on it so well. There's so many times where people like fall or fly out of a bus and land on the concrete. And I'm like, oh my God, that's insane. And it's just so cool. But the best part, everybody's seen Blues Brothers and the scene where you're driving through the mall and breaking all this stuff.
Yeah.
Police Story has that basic thing, except there's no car involved. It's Jackie Chan's fists and his body that's breaking this entire mall. He's breaking all this glass. He's crashing through things. And then the very last big stunt where he slides down the pole and he's breaking all those.
Well, he goes through all the electrical cord, like all the light cords. Like that's a lot of electricity that he gets hit.
There's sparks and glass and all this stuff going on. It's such a big stunt that they show it 3 times. They break the time continuum of the movie, and they're like, "Okay, hold on, let's go back."
Show like, do it again. We got to rewatch that because they already knew every guy when they saw the scene, we're going to be like, "Hold up, we're watching him do this again."
They're like, don't worry, you don't even have to rewind your VHS. We're going to show you it again. So then they show it again. And then they go back and they show you it again. They show you 3 different times that he does this stunt, and it's cool every time. It's just a cool move and a cool thing. And then I also love how Jackie Chan, I love so much about him. And I'm sure I'll talk about him in my next movie about him. But he loves the filmmaking process, and he at the end of every movie, like everything he does in the movie, it seems flawless. He seems great. He seems perfect. And then you get to the end of the movie and you're watching the credits, and he always shows you like behind the scenes. Here's how we made it. Here's all the times I fucked up that move because we had to film it 100 times for me to do it right. But I actually did it because we were going to record it until I got it right. And it's just the fact that he is dedicated to actually doing it, and we're going to do as many takes as it takes to get it, is so cool.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot of Jackie Chan because we already established we each have 2 of his movies on our list. Police Story is not on my list, although I love that movie with everything. And I love the first 2 so much. Love those movies. I've got like the Criterion Collection Blu-ray. The artwork on it, I get excited about. I love Police Story. Yeah. But I decided, like, of all the Chan movies, I was like, I think this I'll keep for my international list, and I'm going to throw these other 2 on just because they fit the style of, like, when I sit down for a kung fu, this is the style that I go for. But, you know, people watch, like, the MCU, everyone knows, oh, we've got mid-credit and post-credit scenes, so we stick around for that. Right. We grew up in a time where when you sat down for a Jackie Chan movie, it was we stick around for the credits because we're going to get to watch all the mistakes, all the bloopers of it. And they're fantastic. He even continued that with like the Rush Hour series and like all of his American films. He still kept that going. Jackie Chan. And that oh my God, that Police Story movie is it's so well written. Like, it's such a good movie. It's perfect combination of like comedy with all the physical humor and jokes and all that integrated with the actual kung fu. You brought up the phones in the police station while he's also heating up ramen. Like actual ramen, not American version of ramen, but like
right.
Which, have you noticed how many fucking noodles they eat in kung fu movies? Like, that is a lot of noodles.
It is
so many noodles.
And in Police Story, he eats them with pencils after he cleans off like the erasers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it still looks good. I would totally do that. That's
I would
fine.
eat it. Let's face it. Every guy probably saw him do that with the pencils and went, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
He's not eating the graphite end. It's fine.
Right. Yeah, it's so good.
Man.
And so funny. Good. Like you said, his balance of action and comedy is great.
Yeah.
The best thing about him is he humanizes his fights so well, where during the fights he does these insane things. You're like, no person is that coordinated or they have that good of timing to do, unless you do 1,000 takes like he does. But he does do them, and then throughout the course of the fight, he shows the like the real stakes. Like every pause, he's like, "Oh my god!"
Right,
or my face, or my hand, or my leg, like that. It hurts him constantly, but he has to do it in order to survive it.
Yeah,
and it just humanizes it and makes it that much more real. And he gets worn out. He gets exhausted the whole time, and he's always at an underdog. He's always like Rocky, where he just has to like outlast that person. He's just too good. I love Jackie.
He is. Yeah, Jackie Chan. Oh, God damn it. He was such a huge part of my childhood, as I imagine yours as well. I watched when we decided this, I was like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to be able to rewatch every Jackie Chan movie that I grew up watching, because there's so many Jackie Chan movies.
Yeah.
So I just stuck with the ones that I own personally, with the exception of like one that I haven't gotten around to actually purchasing yet because it's expensive. One good thing about the internet, you can find the movies you're looking for. Usually.
That's true.
That's such a good pick, man. Well, my number 7 is not out of China. We have been sticking with China quite a bit. Mine's not. Mine goes to Indonesia.
Okay.
Oh, but now I'm second guessing the country that I'm in. That was like one of the notes I told myself. Make sure you jot that country down, and then I didn't because I was like, how would I forget that one?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean.
Bite myself in the ass. Well, technically, okay, way off. Not Indonesia. Let's pretend the last 45 seconds never happened. I do
We're
have
keeping it
Indonesia
in.
stuff, but not this one. This one starts in Thailand, goes to Australia.
Okay.
So this is another one of those movies where you get to get a glimpse of different culture, and as everyone who's listened to our show, watched our show long enough knows, like I get sucked into that where you get immersed into different culture, lifestyles, and all that. This is a big one where it's this tiny village in Thailand. They're like in the middle of the jungle. The whole like village's purpose is to protect elephants because elephants are regarded to be like super sacred and we need to protect them and cherish them and all that stuff. While the main character, two of the elephants end up getting taken to be sold, and he follows, like, his whole life's purpose is to protect these elephants. So he follows the elephants to Australia to try and rescue them and bring them back home. If you have not watched a Tony Jaa film and you like Kung Fu movies, you are missing out because this dude is an absolute beast. He does what Chan did with he does all of his own crazy stunts. But there's no comedy to his stunt work. It is all very fast paced. It's all Muay Thai style fighting.
Yeah.
So my number 7 is one of his movies called The Protector. This movie, when I watched it, some of the fight scenes and the speed of the fight scenes is just mind-boggling. It's a cool story. Nothing too crazy. It's a pretty bittersweet movie, actually. There's a lot of scenes in it where you're like, oh my God, how can this get any worse? And some of the CGI, like there's a green screen part in it that is just the absolute worst, but the movie is still badass enough that you don't like hate the film.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tony Jaa is just like, he is a master. I've got another one of his on my list, but not yet. Because his movies they blew me away with the style of fighting that he does and the heavy incorporation with his that like old school Thai culture mentality of here's what we hold sacred. Here's how our lifestyles are when it's not like all about everything around us, but like the connection to the world. The Protector is just, oh my God. If you want to see the fight scenes that just break your brain, this is one of them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I remember you bringing up The Protector, like just in passing not that long ago. And so I had to seek it out and find it, but I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah.
I do like Tony Jaa. I have seen a couple of his other movies, but The Protector is not one of them. I think I know why you thought it was Indonesia, though, because I get a similar vibe from Thai martial art movies versus Indonesian movies like The Raid. There's a very similar, the dialect is similar and the fighting style seems similar.
At least to us. I'm sure we're way off on that one. So we apologize.
To us,
we're just
laymen.
We're schmucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Protector is just it's such a cool movie, and goddamn, those fight scenes. There's a couple of them that just go on forever that you're like, you are physically tired by the time the fight scene will end. And that's always a fun experience when you're watching a Kung Fu movie.
Yeah. It puts you into the movie.
Yeah.
It's a fun thing. Okay. My number 6 we are on.
Yes,
I
sir.
scroll back up. My number 6 is the second movie directed by Louis Leterrier, and may be unknown, but lesser appreciated. Should be more appreciated. The only Jet Li movie on my list, and it is called Unleashed.
Oh my God. You and I would have had a crossover. This is the only movie of his, like his solo outing, that I was like, this movie's badass. I love this movie, but it's an honorable mention for me.
I felt that's exactly what you were probably referring to when you said that, because that's exactly what it is. I like some of his other, specifically more foreign focused films like Hero and Fearless for sure. But of the big American releases in the early 2000s, he has some mediocre ones, some stinkers, but Unleashed is like a sleeper hit that I don't think gets as much appreciation as it should. It's such a deep, emotional, dramatic like story.
It's a dark story.
It's so dark. He plays this person who, as a child, was enslaved and raised as a dog, basically. Like, he's the pet of this gangster who's essentially an attack dog in human form, and has known nothing else his entire life. And now he's a 30-something-year-old man and ends up getting separated, kind of escapes. And the bad guy is, or the gangster is Bob Hoskins, who is great. He is vicious and brutal and so cruel to him as his like owner, quote unquote owner. But when Jet Li's character Danny escapes and meets Morgan Freeman, who's like this blind, kind guy who like adopts Danny as like his son, basically.
Oh yeah, just immediately without like question, just, oh, I recognize you're on tough times. Come find me. Like, I'll teach you how to appreciate life and growth. Through music. And oh my God, dude, Unleashed is so good.
And he's like this person who has been treated as a slave and a pet his entire life, and is all of a sudden learning what it means to be human. Like, he starts having these human experiences and gaining respect and dignity and all these normal things that, you know, we take for granted. And the way Jet Li plays it is so perfect.
Yeah.
And he's badass. Like, he's fucking brutal as the fights when they sick him on those like guys, or he fights in those that pool or whatever. The fighting is so cool. Yeah. But the heart and emotion and story is one of my favorites. One of the strongest, I think. Yeah.
Unleashed is like, it ended up getting bumped for Enter the Dragon, and I'm a sucker for like nostalgia, so that's why Enter the Dragon ended up taking that spot. But Unleashed is like, rewatching that again, I was like, dude, I forgot how fucking good this movie is. The story is compelling. It's weird, but like, it makes sense. The whole danger of like conditioning from a young age, what can that do like on the long-term effects, and how do you break that mentality? Of course, being a huge like I'm the kind of person that uses movies and music as my way of like being connected to the world or working through problems. So to see a movie where that's like at the center of the story is very like, oh my God, not saying I'm some crazed conditioned man, but who knows?
But it does, I think, strike a chord with everybody that hasn't been enslaved and human trafficked and all this stuff, that it's still such a perfectly executed human story that you all connect with and care about him and want him to succeed. And it's like extreme Stockholm syndrome. It's pretty crazy to watch. And I didn't know till this week, it's written by Luc Besson, who wrote not only The Transporter and Taken most recently, but The Fifth Element and Leon the Professional. Yeah. I'm like, oh, of course it's great.
That's why, like, Professional. That's why the oddity of Unleashed with the whole, like, the collar aspect and the conditioning aspect, it makes so much sense when you find out who wrote the movie that immediately you're like, oh yeah, I get it. I'm totally like, yep.
Yeah.
Because he has that reputation, like, in his style of writing. Oh yeah, Unleashed is such a good movie. Man, we were so close to having such an oddball of a like crossover. Oh, damn it! Enter the Dragon. Why you got to hit that nostalgia
Well,
string?
it is Enter the Dragon. It's kind of a
It's
big
true.
deal.
It's true. Well, I have been stoked about my number 6, Jake. I can't tell you how long I've been like waiting to tell you this.
Okay.
That I have watched this movie several times. Because I thought like, oh, we'll probably get around to doing a Kung Fu episode like last year, and then it just didn't happen. And this is the kind of episode that we've been like, oh, we should do that. Well, we're going to do all these other episodes first. So I'm so excited to bring this up. This is a movie that you bring up constantly, I feel. You have talked about it for so long, and it's one that I just never got around to watching for the longest time. And then I finally got around to watching it, and I have watched it several times, and it is one of the best martial arts movies I have ever seen. Like, the story is cool. I love that it's based on like actual events. Obviously they take liberties with some things, but it works well for the telling of the story. But this is another one I brought it up with like Crouching Tiger, where they really focus on like the discipline and the principle of martial arts, not just being fighting, but more of like, how do you utilize it in how you conduct yourself in the public and in life in general. I really love oh my God, it's one of the coolest movies I've ever seen. My number 6 is IP Man. Like,
nice. I always pronounce it Ip Man.
Or Ip Man, however you pronounce it. This movie, dude, when I finally sat down and watched it, it was exactly like I felt when I watched Ninja Assassin, but instead of like the comedic, this is awesome. It was very much just, oh, this movie means a lot. Like, this movie's so fucking good. And the fight scenes are incredible. Just absolutely incredible. This reminded me of like the Kung Fu 1937 version of Cinderella Man. That's what this movie kind of struck me as. And I absolutely love Cinderella Man. And so Ip Man just, this hit every perfect chord for me. And I couldn't believe I waited so long to get around to watching it. But when I finally did, like, I've watched it probably too many times now. But the more I watched it, the more it was like, nope, this movie has the same effect on me every time I see it. And it's just so well done.
Yeah. It's an overlap for me as well. And obviously I love it. You led up to it perfectly, and especially Donnie Yen, who I wasn't super familiar with. I had heard of him, but I hadn't really experienced everything that he's capable of. And Ip Man is a great introduction because he's awesome. He's so
cool.
And he like carries himself in this way that I think does a good job of personifying the actual like historical character, making him into a even bigger legend than he already was. Anybody who doesn't know, he's like most known for being the master that trained Bruce Lee. So he's like really cool, but he's even cooler in Ip Man, like just that general story and that time frame in the history of it. I love the history and like the periodness of the early 30s China and this the pre-Japanese war situation that they had going on, and how he kind of like trains all of these like villagers and civilians to resist the Japanese and all this stuff. So he just kind of becomes their hero grandmaster guy. And it's such a cool movie. It's on my list. We'll talk about it more for sure.
I was like, when I sat down and watched it, because I really knew Donnie Yen from like Rogue One. That was my actual introduction to him. And his character conducts himself kind of similar to Ip Man.
Very.
And I've always kind of been drawn to his character. He's probably my favorite character in Rogue One, honestly, at least high up on my favorite characters. But then when I sat down and watched this and just got that sense, like that whole, in that time frame, doing what he has to do, not letting he's so humble But I like
Right.
that even as humble as he is in that movie, they still show him as like flawed. You know, he doesn't spend enough time with his family, and you kind of see that
Mhm.
separation. I really respect that they showed him still flawed and still like he
Mhm.
has moments of letting emotion kind of take over. And we'll talk more about it, obviously. But yeah, Ip Man
Mhm.
just, oh my God, dude, that movie blew me out of the water. And I was like, at
Mhm.
first, for the while, a long time, I've been like, it'll at least be an honorable mention. And then I just
Mhm.
rewatched it a few times after that and was like, oh no. Oh no. This
Yeah.
movie is just, it's too good. I can't,
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah, it's so good. While you're talking about the humility and the family side, I was going to bring up. I love that as well. I love how he does all of his like training and stuff in private. He doesn't really want to
Yeah.
flaunt it, and then but the legend kind of gets out, and these people come to like challenge him, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, I guess we can spar, but we'll do it privately in my living room, and we'll close all the doors and not let anybody know." And yeah, he's trying to like make time for his family, not let his whole status interrupt dinner and all this
Yeah.
stuff. But there's that uh, tension between him and his wife. She's like, "God damn it, there's another guy here to like fight you," and I guess we'll go in the other room. And he's politely waiting and trying to spend time. But yeah, it's a cool movie.
It is.
Okay. My number 5 is my other Jackie Chan movie. I wanted so badly for him to be higher
Wow.
up, but my top 5, honestly, there's so much difference between them, or so little difference between them that they're interchangeable. It's so difficult to choose, but I felt like I love this movie. It's my favorite Jackie Chan movie. I've watched it the most out of any of his movies. But there are these other ones I'm like, this one is just a little bit better, a little bit bigger, a little bit overall complete in certain
Yeah.
ways. But that's not a knock on Jackie Chan at all. So my number 5 is Who Am I?
Oh
Which
man.
I love Who Am I? I return to it constantly. I think it might be because it's kind of different than all of his other
Yeah, it
movies.
is way different than his others.
It takes place in like Africa and Holland, so the scenery is different. He plays this member of the special forces group, like a mercenary group that kind of get double crossed and they all get killed, and he's the only survivor, but he loses his memory, and that's different because most of his movies he plays like a cop who has to go on his own against the bad guys. That's most of his movies. Uh, but Who Am I? I like especially the mystery of it,
Yeah.
where he's lost his memory. It's kind of like Memento. You don't know much as an audience. He lost his memory, and you're kind of trying to figure out with him who he is. Who is this person talking to him? Are they a friend or a foe? Like they're being friendly, but they're saying they're from like the CIA, but are they really? Are they a reporter? Are they not a reporter? So the mystery of it is kind of part of the most fun of it.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the movie, the like last half of it, there's a lot of really long action sequences or fight scenes in it. The first half of it, there's not that much, honestly. And so I was rewatching, I was like, oh, I don't know if this really counts. But then we like get into like the action, I'm like, absolutely it counts. 100% it has to count. But the whole first half, you're still engrossed and involved, and you're very much invested in him and his situation, and it's such a fun movie. I think it's his most fun movie, where he has to go through certain situations. He's very I don't know. He wears the emotion of his character on his face maybe more
Hmm.
than some of his other movies, where he's in this turmoil of not knowing who he is, trying to figure out what's going on, and 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 I just love it. I love everything about this movie. And the fight at the end against the two guys is like the biggest, coolest, like actual straight up 100% like kung fu fight.
Yeah.
And then there's other big fights in it where he's trying to escape in handcuffs. That's always a good time. And the scene where he's like, they're in Holland, so they have like these wooden shoes, and he has these fight where he doesn't have shoes on, so he puts on these wooden shoes, and they end up they're like suddenly he has weapons on his feet, and it's kind of like the transporter where he puts on the bicycle clips. But this obviously came before it, inspired it, I'm sure. So who am I? So good.
Yeah.
And Jackie Chan as a director, I needed to touch on. There's a lot of like interviews he's given about directing. He's done every part of the filmmaking process, which is part of my favorite thing. Started out as a stunt man, like an unknown extra, doing stunts, doing directing, doing writing, obviously starring and doing stunt coordination. Like he's generally the guy who's like, okay, I'm the star of the movie and I'm directing it, but also I'm coordinating all these stunts. So you and you go and do this stuff. So he's just such a cool guy, but he does all these interviews about kind of like the main tenets of what you need to do to make a good fight scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I think more people need, especially filmmakers, need to pay attention to that because so many modern, especially American action movies, the action, like the movies are cool and the action is cool, but the fights are, especially the editing of the fights.
Yeah.
You can film good martial arts scenes, but you can ruin it in editing because you are over editing or you don't show the action and the reaction in the same shot or something like that. Jackie Chan talks a lot about if you need to do two shots where you have a wide shot of the action and then they hit a guy and you zoom into a close up of the impact of that, don't just go like punch, cut to close up, continue the punch. You have to cut, back up that punch again, and then in the close up go, because it takes the audience time to catch up and to pay attention. Like your eyes need that time to adjust to the different shot. And that's missing. So much American fight scenes seem so like chaotic and like, I don't know what's going on because you're not doing that. You're not making it clear in your shots what's going on. And Jackie Chan always does that. And it's why he's so good.
It's so good. Yeah. You and I have talked about that kind of his approach to filming fight scenes. We've talked about it a handful of times. You brought up a point a couple weeks ago on our Matrix deep dive of like some of the fight scenes in the second Matrix, like the editing of it just doesn't feel correct. Like you'll see the speed or the force of the kick or a hit, and then they'll cut to that close up and you feel that disconnect. And I agree with you 100% because you do. I think the most prominent one is like Neo's first fight with the upgraded agents. He goes to kick a guy in the chin and they do that weird cut and he flies across the room, but you lose that momentum of the kick.
Yeah.
As soon as you brought that up in the Matrix episode, I immediately thought of Jackie Chan's approach to filming the fight scene and was like, oh yeah, because they cut it. They tried to do like this quick edit to it where they should have just let the kick be.
Right.
Some of the most effective hits in fight, hand-to-hand combat fight scenes aren't the close-up hits. It can be those ones that you as the audience will catch and you're like, oh, dang. Like, I saw that, right? Yeah, Jackie Chan is, he's just a movie god. Like he really is a movie god. I haven't gotten to his movies on my list yet. They're coming, but
I think part of the issue with the second Matrix and other kung fu movies in general, the physics don't feel real. They don't feel right, and that's because a lot of them use like wire work or special effects or other things to make it over the top, make it bigger than reality. And you lose reality sometimes if you go too far with it. And Jackie Chan, especially early on, I think later in life, he started doing more wire stuff, but early on, especially, everything is so real. He actually jumped off of that. He actually dove through that window. He actually, like, those kicks are pretty grounded, and the audience connects to that as like, I recognize that is real, and it makes it work so much better.
And then you get to see the credit scenes and you see him actually performing it and practicing it, and your brain goes, oh dang, it's so much crazier when I have confirmation that he did this.
Right.
Yeah. Who Am I is great. Man, trying to like narrow down his movies was difficult for me.
Yeah.
And my two really did come down to like the nostalgia kick and just what did I tend to watch more.
Yeah.
All right. We're on 5, right?
Yep.
All right. So in true movie boners fashion, you or I, or sometimes both of us on a top 10 list, will have one movie that will raise some eyebrows or get the like, oh, does that one actually count? We tend to do this.
Yeah. Pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. My number 5 is my pick that falls in line with this, but you know, fuck you guys. 1, it's my list. 2, it is a kung fu movie. It's just one of the funniest kung fu movies, and I love that I get to incorporate it on this list.
Yeah.
Physical comedy mixed with martial arts might be one of the greatest things ever. Jackie Chan really highlighted that, obviously, with his career, or did, whatever. But there's a certain 90s comedian who was the master of physical comedy, especially in the 90s. And to see him suit up as a ninja just made it that much better.
Yeah.
Jake already knows. If you don't know, then you're obviously not from the 90s, and I pity you.
I thought you were going with a different kung fu comedy, but now I know exactly what you're doing, and it's even better.
It's even better. My number 5 is Beverly Hills Ninja with Chris Farley. This movie is so freaking fun and funny. Yeah. And yes, it's a kung fu movie. He is the Great White Ninja. Okay? There is a ton of kung fu in this movie. There is so much kung fu in this movie.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of it from Chris Farley is all highly comedic. And, you know, I brought up, like, it's awesome seeing the use of, like, the weapons in Ninja Assassin. Well, Beverly Hills Ninja has the use of weapons, but Chris Farley fashion, so it's all just the worst.
Yeah. Well, the best part is we talked about how ninjas are, like, the perfect killing machine. Most coordinated assassins ever. And then you take Chris Farley, who is famous for being uncoordinated, hilarious, rotund, and put him in a black, like all this whole ninja outfit, and it's just the funniest thing you've ever seen.
It's the funniest thing ever. I love this movie. I was like, originally, oh, this will just be a fun, like, mention. Like, I'll, you know, it won't be on my list. And then I rewatched it and was like, oh, it might be on my list. And then I rewatched it again and was like, I think it's going to be on my list. Told my daughter about it and was like, part of me really wants to watch it with you, but there's one specific scene that would just get real awkward. We could skip it and be okay, but we might still do that. And then I rewatched it again. It was like, yes, this movie is on my list, and it's probably going to be fairly high. So it's my number 5. I adore this movie, and I love Chris Farley. Such a big fan of his. I think of all the like comedian early deaths that we've had, or like Hollywood early deaths at young ages. Yeah, Chris Farley will always be one that hits me the hardest because I grew up 100%. Watching him on SNL and watching his film career really taking off. Even though Almost Heroes is like regarded as a terrible film, I find it funny, genuinely, because it's, you know, it's Matthew Perry and Chris Farley. That's great stuff. But also, like, that was my last movie from Chris Farley, so I will always hold it kind of close. But him as a ninja, oh my God.
he's hands down, no contest, one of the funniest humans to ever live. And I completely agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you need a good laugh with some crazy, like, martial arts scenes, go watch Beverly Hills Ninja. Like, it's got everything you want. It's so good. It's got, you know, kind of a mystery, but not really a mystery. It's got corruption in it that he gets hired to, like, take down. Of course, his prime motivation for the whole story of the movie is falling in love with a blonde bombshell.
Yeah. And I love how he takes on this mission, and he sucks at it because he's not a very good ninja, but he gets by with it because he has the like help of his half brother, who's actually like a great ninja, and so he just kind of like takes the credit for it, and his brother is willing to like help him out.
He just kind of has to endure all of Hyru's fuck ups. So
yeah. Yeah. That's he loves him. It's family.
That's true. It's family.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that's on your list.
I
didn't
am
expect
too.
it at all. Oh jeez. Okay. My number 4 is our first crossover, finally getting around to it. Ip Man. It's so good. Ip Man is like, we've talked about it quite a bit already, but for those movies that is like a period 1930s Chinese movie, I think it just is the perfect one of those. It's the perfect blend of that, and it's pretty epic on the like historical scale, where starts kind of early in his life where he's not as known as that grandmaster, but the whole Japanese war happens, and he has to like train all those civilians, or lets them learn his style so that they can resist better, and kind of starts the rebellion by fighting a general who's like kind of like being tyrannical over all of the civilians and stuff. So he inspires this hope in them in such a great way, and so they start believing that they can resist. And he's such a legendary character, and I think the movie captures that in a great way. It's just in the Wing Chun whole era and style and stuff is so cool. So Ip Man had to be on my list. The whole series, it's created such a long running series. And I've seen most of the movies. I don't know that I've seen all of them, but I've seen most of them, and they're all pretty good. And so Donnie Yen and everything is a great. I'm very excited to see Donnie Yen in the next John Wick.
Yeah, because
I think that will be extra cool. So if you want to get ready for that, watch it, man.
Yeah, I haven't watched the sequels yet. I got so stuck on that first one that I'm kind of nervous to watch the sequels, just because like that first one hit a chord. Like it really just everything. Everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is so good."
Yeah, I would say the second one especially is better than most sequels. Okay. The second one especially is really good. The other ones are not as good as the first two, but at least watch the first two. Right.
Yeah, that Ip Man was just, I love that story. I love seeing that kind of stuff. And Ip Man, when I was watching that was the movie that I had one of those thoughts. Well, it was one of the movies where I had that thought of like, man, I should go put myself in a class, not just to pull off all the like moves or learn a style, but it was really kind of like, how great is that to just live your life where you're just so like the perfect humbleness, where you're just like, it is what it is. Like genuinely, not just you're saying it to try and like brush stuff off or like avoid stuff, but to genuinely just feel like I accept what it is. So
right.
That kind of discipline is incredible.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I need that discipline constantly. I'm like, I should really do something about that. And obviously, these guys figured it out hundreds or thousands of years ago, so maybe they have the answer.
Yeah. Ip Man I knew it was going to be on your list, and I was so excited when I was like, it has to be on mine as like, because there are some movies that they're just too good. And Ip Man's one of those. And I was like, Jake's going to love that I put it on mine. He doesn't know that I've watched it yet. It's going to be great. I know it's on his because he talks about it constantly. And that's not a bad thing. Like, go watch this movie. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
Go watch it.
Right.
I'm so glad. I knew that was going to be high on your list too. I was like, I wasn't sure if it would crack your top 3, but I knew it was going to get real close if it didn't.
Yeah, it was close.
Oh man. Well, my number 4, I'm sticking with the comedy. This is the first Jackie Chan film on my list. Very early Jackie Chan. And I know there's like a couple other versions or like sequel / other version of it, but the original from 1976, 78. I adore this movie. I really do. I love everything in this movie. I think it's hilarious watching a super young Jackie Chan be crazy cocky and silly right from the get-go. But then his fight scenes and his stunts that he does in this are just like, whether it's the full-fledged fight scenes or him doing push-ups on his forearms and like throwing his body up to do them on his fists. It's crazy watching him do this stuff, but
he's so athletic.
So athletic. So my number 4 is Drunken Master. This movie is like, it's in the 70s era of like the silly kung fu movies, and it does follow. They were all pretty much the same movie, honestly.
Yeah. It's true.
But because it's Jackie Chan, I'm a sucker for it. And there's little gags in it and stunts in it that they stick with me more. I already brought up the one where during his training, he's like hanging upside down by his ankles, and he has to fill these 2 teacups from barrels that are below his head, and he has to fill a single barrel that's behind his legs. So he has to like do this crazy sit up, and he folds his body in half. It's nuts. Watching that made me just like, I don't think I've ever seen a scene in a movie that made me feel so physically useless before. Like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
But yeah, that first Drunken Master, that original one, it's just so good. And it's like, it's essential Jackie Chan. And it's so much fun seeing him in that earliest stage. And then knowing like I continued watching his movies, and I just love how he stuck with his formula. He expanded with quite a bit of it, but he always maintained like the principle of how he approached all of it. And it's so cool to see that even from that young of an age, being the stunt coordinator on it and stuff. Drunken Master is like the perfect kung fu movie. It really is.
Yeah. It definitely is. It's one of my favorites as well. I like both of them. I like the sequel, Legend of the Drunken Master. It's just as good. And he plays that. I think the drunken style plays so well into his natural ability to flow through the environment and the props and everything, and also have fun during the fight. Like, you're having a fight with these guys, but there's so many jokes, little momentary jokes during the fight that work so well when you're playing a drunk fighting style. It's different.
And the amount of wine that he consumes, and like the over exaggerated drinking, where it's not just tipping the jug up, it's like a full body movement that's like super jerky and overly dramatic. It's just, I love it. I love every second of Drunken Master. You know, the opening scene of them in their training, and he's doing that like teenage thing in class where you're making faces behind your teacher's back and trying to be the smart ass, but you're going to get shown up. Like, I love that. Yeah. Drunken Master,
his face is so expressive.
Yeah. And it's crazy seeing him that young with that hair. But yeah, Drunken Master and that style is so funny to watch, because if you've seen enough kung fu movies, you know, everything's about like flow, and you have to adapt quickly, and you just kind of have to let like whatever the Drunken Master style, or the Drunken Gods. So it's based on 8 drunken gods. It just works so great. It's almost like they knew, hey, let's parody what everyone's already doing, but we're going to do it in a very serious way almost. But it'll be funny
Yeah.
because it's drunk gods. Oh my God. When he does the female god,
Yeah.
that might be one of my favorite gags in the whole movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a fun, the lore and the culture and everything is really fun to me as well. And I think
Yep.
Drunken Master is a great example of that. I don't remember if they talk about it as much in the first one, but I know for sure in the second one, because I watched that most recently. They refer like to the difference of northern and southern styles,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big part of the Ip Man series as well. But that just that cultural thing where they have so kung fu is such a big thing, especially in China, obviously, that everybody's doing it. Everybody has a style. Everybody has a dojo or school, and and so they're judgmental of, oh, you have this drunken style. Nobody actually does that. It's not really cool, but he makes it work, and it's so cool.
Yeah. And then you see like a full-fledged, the actual full-fledged kung fu fights. They are great. They're fast. They're brutal.
Yeah.
Like they kick so much ass, pun intended.
Yeah.
But, oh my
Yeah.
God. So it's really cool seeing the physical comedy just get mixed so perfectly into like the actual fight scene. So Drunken Master, right?
Yeah.
I trying to narrow it down when I rewatched this one on top of like Operation Condor or Project A. I was like, Drunken Master's going to take this one. This was like a big nostalgia piece for me, but it's also just genuinely so well made. So
yeah, it really is. I was like, I remember as I was thinking about them, I almost had Drunken Master 2 or Legend of Drunken Master instead of Who Am I? I was like, I've loved Who Am I longer. I've watched it so much more, but it's been a while since I watched it. And I was like, Drunken Master is probably the more legendary one. And so I had it on my list. And then I rewatched Who Am I? I'm like, no, it actually is as good as I remember. So I have to put it on there, even just for the history and nostalgia as well. But it should be way up there. All right. So top three. Here we go. I have my Tony Jaa movie, which you alluded to may be on your list as well. My number 3 is Ong Bak, Thai warrior.
Well,
Muay Thai warrior.
We have a crossover not only for the movie, but the spot as well.
Nice. That's awesome. I was like, we're getting up there. It's possible that could happen, but I didn't want to jinx it. I'm very glad that it did. And yeah, Ong Bak. Well, first of all, obviously Chinese movies are king of kung fu, but do not sleep on Thailand.
But
because
Tony Jaa in Thailand and Ong Bak, holy shit.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it I love how it kind of starts out pretty slow, where it starts out also pretty familiar to kung fu fans, where it's a guy in a village and he's doing his training, and then a Ong Bak gets stolen. Is like this deity of this village that they want back. They feel like their village is going to like be destroyed if
it'll suffer. And the village does kind of suffer. So the head of the statue of this deity gets stolen, and a lot like the protector, he gets tasked with seeking it out, finding it to bring it back home.
Yeah. And so he kind of goes on this adventure to find it, ends up getting going to this fight club, underground fight club, which because there's a guy that robs him and ends up going there, so he just like ends up at this fight club. And I'm like, oh yeah, here we go, we're going to a fight club, and he doesn't end up fighting right away, but when he does end up obviously getting pulled into it, it's so cool, and the style is so different, like the way that they move. And maybe it's the way it's shot as well. I think the cinematography helps, but the way that they move, and like a guy will throw a kick and then the guy will like duck under it, and like into it. Like, he'll kick you in your chest as you're trying to kick him in a way that's different than most other movies. So it does such a good job of landing those counters, I guess you would say, in such an interesting way. And then once the fight is kind of over, like the formal fight, the rest of the fight's not over. Like, it leaves the ring. They go into like throwing chairs and tables and all across the whole venue, and it just gets crazy quickly.
So I watched that movie. It was the first Tony Jaa film I saw. It may have actually been his first movie in general, at least starring role. But I remember watching it with a group of people, and all of us were already kind of like blown away by this movie. All of us were like, oh my God, fucking flying knee hits topped off with the elbow to the head. Like, are you kidding me? But the scene that I will never forget, just all of us were like, we jumped out of our seats with just that, like, what? And they do it in the movie like they do with like Police Story, where they're like, yes, that is so badass. We're going to show it to you again. You don't have to rewind it several times. Yeah. But when he is sprinting down the alleyway and the rolled up barbed wire on the stick comes forward and he folds himself in half, jumping forward, and goes through the spool of barbed wire. Mm-hmm. Even when I watch it now, I'm like, oh my God, how the hell do you time this? How the hell do you fold yourself like that? And then I feel very like, I have never been more physically useless in my life.
I just live vicariously through Tony Jaa and Jackie Chan and all these guys.
But yeah, and Tony Jaa does that where he does all of his own stunts, the sparring. You can tell like they are sparring. You can tell the people he's fighting in the movie are also, I would consider them masters in the art as well.
Yeah.
So I like that, especially in En Bak, you really get that sense of like, no, they're like, some of these hits do not look like they are playing nice. Like, some of this looks like he just beat this dude down.
Yeah, it very much reminds me of that's why I confuse it with Indonesia and the Raid, because it feels as frantic and kinetic and violent as those movies do.
But you're able to, like, as fast as they are, you're still able to watch the fight. You're able to follow the hits, the blocks.
Definitely.
Him like kicking into a kick that's already coming his way is insane. Mm-hmm. It's a technique that you're like, why doesn't more people, like, it makes sense. But the way he does it, and you won't get it unless you just watch the movie, but the way he does it, you're like, you feel those hits.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, En Bak, just that movie still blows me away, even when I watch it this last week. And I have the full trilogy, so I've got like the full box set. And 2 and 3 are okay. They're pretty cool. The fight scenes are insane. And it does focus more on like the lore of En Bak instead of this village. So they're like prequel sequels. But the first one is just so good. Like, it's genuinely good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those awesome kind of probably lesser known movies. Like you said, it was, I think, one of Tony Jaa's, at least his breakout role.
Yeah.
One where he actually came to be more internationally known.
But oh my God.
You need to see it.
Yeah. If you like martial arts films, kung fu films or whatever, and you want to see something that's like the stakes are a little higher or the fights are a little on the darker side instead of the silly side, En Bak is, just watch it.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, it's a good example of I love the old like 70s. I love the camp. I love the fun, but I also am enjoying the kind of the more modern 2010s and beyond, where it's real, it's violent, it's like R-rated gore kind of sometimes. And I'm like, this is this is adult. This is cool. I love those as a kid. They're so nostalgic. But I'm a man now. I want some real vicious fighting, and that's what Ong Bak is.
Yeah. Go check that one out, folks. Oh man.
All right.
I love that. That was our one of our crossovers. Not just the movie, but the number 3 slot. That makes me so happy. I love it when that happens.
I do too. That's really fun. My number 2 movie, I'm so excited to talk about because I don't know if you've seen it, and you have to see it. So I'm so excited to tell you about it. And anybody who hasn't seen it, I'm excited to talk about it regardless. It is the only movie that Keanu Reeves has ever directed.
Oh, I know what one you're talking about.
And so I that alone is a kind of just a standout sticking point to me. But it's actually good. It's actually great, and that's why it's my number 2 kung fu movie. It's called Man of Tai Chi. Have you seen this film?
I have not watched it, but I know what movie you're talking about. It has been on my list as a Keanu Reeves fan. It's been on my list to watch, and I just have not seen it yet. I put it on my list right after I watched 47 Ronin, because that movie... Don't let critics tell you 47 Ronin is badass. Go watch that. But
yeah. 47 Ronin I think was on my fantasy list because it's more mystical and magical, but very cool.
Yeah.
But Man of Tai Chi, Keanu Reeves doesn't play the lead character. He is in it. He plays the kind of the villain. Actually, he plays like this gangster who's holding these a fight club essentially, and his competitors or contestants, he's looking for a new contestant, and he comes across this guy who's the lead character named Tiger Chen, who is just like a normal guy. He practices Tai Chi, which everybody knows, or generally people know Tai Chi is just like a relaxing exercise movement thing where you are trying to get your chi, your energy inside of you out and calm and all this stuff. But it's a gentle art. It's not really powerful. It's not a fighting style, really. But this character, Tiger Chen, he feels like he can incorporate power into his Tai Chi. And so he does. He goes to a tournament and uses his power. His master, he's like the only student of his master. His master has this dojo that is like run down, and so he doesn't have any students. It's just this one guy. And so his master doesn't think that he should incorporate power. He thinks it will corrupt the Tai Chi and all this stuff. And the movie is kind of right. One of the reasons I love this movie is that it shows this duality between control and power. And the main character kind of embodies that, where he's trying to use his power, but he's also, the more you use your power, you're kind of losing your control. And so Tai Chi is kind of the balance of that, or at least the movie is the balance of that. And so it's a very cool personification of that process. And I especially like the difference between the tournaments that he goes to. He's going to these formal tournaments, and he's doing very well with his unique style of this powerful Tai Chi that people aren't expecting. He's doing very well, and he catches the eye of Keanu Reeves, who wants him to come to his tournaments, make a shitload of money, because if you win, you kind of make a lot of money. And when he goes to try out for the tournament, he's in this, it's essentially like a hotel ballroom. It's this empty room with a one-way mirror in front of it. And the fight that happens in that room is one of the coolest fights I've ever seen in my entire life. It's so simple. There's no environment at all. It's just these two guys fighting. It's the coolest thing ever. And there's several of those kind of fights, but the first one especially just blows your mind. And it's at that moment you're like, this movie fucking rules. And so as he does more and more of Keanu Reeves' underground fights, those have no rules. He wants them to be pure. He wants to inspire this guy to find how powerful he can be if he's not held back by anything. And so there's a conflict between this life and death, no rules fight, and he's still doing the like formal Olympic tournaments, and he ends up kind of like pushing the boundaries, breaking the rules in those, and realizing that it's not, he can't do the same thing in both. And so it's just, the story is extremely cool. There's also like a detective who's trying to find or investigate Keanu Reeves like underground. He's like this weird billionaire that is throwing these things, and so she's trying to investigate him at the same time. It's such a cool movie. You have to check it out. I adore it. I just think it's hilarious that Keanu Reeves directed it, and it's the only thing he's ever done. He hasn't done anything since 2013.
Yeah.
He needs to do more. You would expect the star of The Matrix and John Wick and all this stuff to make a good kung fu movie, and you're not disappointed. He absolutely does.
Yeah, I've heard you bring it up a handful of times, and I do need to see it. I really do. I'm looking it up right now.
You really do. It's also kind of like 47 Ronin, where there's an element of fantasy. When he does unlock the chi inside of him, it gets kind of super human in a sense.
Okay.
But in a grounded kind of way, like it makes sense for the movie, and it's really cool. And the choreography, like I mentioned, especially the one in that one room, is so cool. But I think it's helped by the camera movement. The camera moves with the characters in such a fluid way that it's really beautiful. And you can tell Keanu has such a healthy respect for the classic kung fu movies, because it's filmed in a very modern way. But even in these modern situations, when he's at like a Olympic style formal tournament, once they take like their starting poses, the camera will like push in on their face in like a way that you're like, that's so 70s kung fu. And it's so awesome.
I like that. Yeah, I do need to watch this. I did not expect it to be on your list, but you have brought this movie up a handful of times, and every time you've brought it up, you tell me you have to watch this movie.
Yeah. It's up there with, like, I used to bring up The Raid constantly until everybody I know has heard me talk about The Raid 100 times. And now this is kind of the next movie. I'm like, everybody needs to watch this movie right away. If you liked The Raid, you'll like this. It's so cool.
Hey, man, we all have those movies. It's okay. It's okay. All right. Yeah, I'll probably have to. Yeah. All right. Well, my number 2 is my next Jackie Chan movie. Now, this is kind of rough for me because my number 2 and number 1, like a lot of my lists, can intertwine. I went into this for sure that Jackie Chan was going to be number 1, regardless of what movie I picked of his. And then I watched my number 1 and was like, oh, no. I think Chan's going to have to take the passenger side. Anyways, my number 2, you and I have already said this a few times today. There are so many Jackie Chan movies that we love, that have stuck with us. And honestly, by only settling on 2 of his to be in a top 10 does not take away anything from his other movies. I love Jackie Chan's films so much, and they all mean a lot to me. They all hit the nostalgia chord a lot. My number 2 takes the spot primarily because of the nostalgia, because I tended to watch this one more. It is not, my dad would expect me to say First Strike, which I thought for sure would be, but that's an honorable mention for me. It is not First Strike. Honestly, I love that movie. But I watched my number 2 a little bit more because I thought the fight scenes in my pick just had higher stakes, and there were more of them. So in terms of like Kung Fu style, I think this one has a little bit more to offer in just the fight scenes alone. Plus the story is really interesting. You already brought up, like, his movies are always, he's visiting and gets mixed up with the bad people and has to protect or like be the good guy. This one is no different. But the fight scenes in it are really cool. There are a little bit higher stakes because he's battling like this weird biker gang that don't play by rules. So he kind of has to figure something out with that and just beat them down like he does. And he does. So my number 2 is Rumble in the Bronx.
Yeah.
I adore it. Like, I love this movie so much. It's so crazy how it goes from just like he's visiting his uncle who owns this grocery shop in the Bronx, you know, who is actually, when you meet his uncle is selling his store. Like, oh no, I'm getting ready to sell it. My fiance and I are about to get married and we're bailing out of here. Like, we're going to take our money and retire and just enjoy life. And Jackie Chan's character just kind of like, he like not really falls in love with, but he kind of gets mixed up with the new shop owner. And that's when you meet the biker gang and all that. But Rumble in Bronx, it goes from just him protecting the shop and kind of doing a lousy job at it at one point to like him water skiing on just his shoes behind a freaking hovercraft. While fighting gang leaders and all that. It takes a wild turn, but the stunts are insane. The fight scenes they feel heavy. They feel like there's heavy stakes at it. They're heavy hitting. He still does the Jackie Chan thing where he brings in the props and the comedy with you brought it up. Like, he'll have moments during a fight where he'll like shake off his hand, like ow, 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 or rub his face or his leg. He still does all of that. But this is one of those where his character kind of he's faced with things that he's not used to seeing. And I really like seeing him have to adapt to that. Like the Bronx lifestyle in the mid 90s, you know, there's not just this one gang, but there's gangs everywhere. It kind of looks like the slums, at least this particular area that he's in. He befriends like this crippled boy who's in a wheelchair, whose sister happens to be a part of the gang. And, like, it's got some pretty cheesy scenes in it, but it's got some scenes in it that are just, oh my God. I love Rumble in the Bronx. Yeah. It's so good. It's so good. It is Jackie Chan just like encompassing everything he's done all into this quick 90-minute film. It's so good.
Right. Right. And it's the one that made him kind of put him on the map as far as American cinema. He broke into Americans' consciousness with Rumble in the Bronx. And that's what is so crazy to me, that it came out in 1995 and he was 41 years old at the time, and then went on for decades longer, becoming an even bigger legend.
Oh yeah, he wasn't done yet. He wasn't done yet.
Not far from it. Very impressive.
Yeah, I just, when I was really trying to figure out, like, because it did boil down to First Strike, which is incredible and hilarious, and the fight scenes in that are insane. At one point, he jumps through a ladder, and as he lands inside the ladder, he folds it, spins it over his head, and uses that as like a deflecting tool.
Yeah.
What?
That's one of the like standout stunts to me, is his use of the ladder in the fight. That one always sticks out.
Yeah. But I remember growing up, I watched Rumble in the Bronx more than I did First Strike. I love First Strike, but Rumble in the Bronx that was like the go-to for me. That was, I'm going to see some cool fight scenes. I'm going to have like a story of this guy trying to adapt and realize his nice demeanor, and just the fact that he can kick someone's ass within a few hits isn't enough. He's going to have to like pursue and actually be a continuing stopping force. Rumble in the Bronx is so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's a great pick. All right, my number one most favorite, most iconic, top kung fu movie of all time. You already brought it up. We haven't talked about it on my end, though. Enter the Dragon. I think everybody knows it. The imagery alone is so iconic. The mirror fight, especially. I'm a sucker for mirror fights. I love Conan the Destroyer. I love John Wick. I love Enter the Dragon. So it sticks out to me, and I'll always remember it fondly because I was a fan of all of these Jackie Chan movies, but I was mostly a fan of them because they were fun and funny. He's a very funny guy. But I remember Enter the Dragon is kind of when I graduated to, oh, these can be serious.
Yeah.
They can be violent and brutal, and he can kill people. Jackie Chan doesn't kill anybody. Okay, he's a knight. He's like just trying. It's self-defense constantly. He's trying to defend himself. But Bruce Lee murders people with his fists, and there's naked chicks in it. It's just an adult movie, which was very cool. It also I like it so much, I think, because I love James Bond movies, and Enter the Dragon has that same feel where it's 70s. It's a secret tournament of champions from all over the world being brought to this very this like eccentric villain on this island, has a lair, and he's like trafficking girls and doing drugs and like drug trafficking and stuff. But he's also just like a crazy guy with a hand that comes off, and he replaces his false hand with hooks and knives and weapons and slashes people. So it's an eccentric villain on an island. It just feels so James Bond-like to me with Kung Fu,
it's
which makes it even cooler.
And instead of a secret agent, it's just a really renowned fighter they hire.
Yeah. He's just a guy at a dojo going through like his training, and they're like, hey, we need you to enter this tournament. And by the way, also be undercover with like the CIA and go and try and find out information, and we'll end up busting this kingpin guy.
Yeah.
And so it's so cool. All of the like fights, especially his first big fight where he's like in the yard, he's surrounded by all those guys and takes on that like super big guy, and ends up like doing that jump, and then slow motion, just like his facial like tension is so intense, and he's doing, of course, the like sounds constantly. But I love it, and I love the different like characters. There's like that American gambler guy who is just kind of along for the ride, and then the black guy who's just kind of like trying to fight the cops because they're being racist at him and stuff. And it's just so cool, and it perfectly personifies Bruce Lee's like mentality. He's formed a larger than life mentality in off screen of his whole Jeet Kune Do philosophy of style of no style, and kind of trying to break the mold. The Enter the Dragon is basically that, where he follows the same beliefs and is conflicting with these guys who have a very strict style and all that stuff. So it's just the most perfect, the most iconic kung fu movie on so many levels. I wanted so badly for Jackie Chan to be on my list at number one as well. And I think partly because I have like this conflict where I love Jackie Chan so much, but I misunderstood him at such a young age where I'm like, oh, he's funny, and that was it. And it wasn't until later in life that I fully understood, no, he does all these stunts. He's focused on the perfection of execution of this stuff. His focus on his directorial style and just portraying the actual art to the audience so that they feel it is so beautiful. But I didn't get that so much until I went through this journey of liking him because he's funny, gravitating to Bruce Lee because he's so serious and real and violent. And then, oh, I actually love Jackie Chan more, but I only respect Jackie Chan because I went through the Bruce Lee phase and understood all of that stuff. So it's been a journey of enlightenment.
I think it's really cool being like huge Jackie Chan fans and Jet Li fans. All these guys, huge fans of them. But you can tell all of them. I would even say like even Tony Jaa, and I might be wrong, but my perception is you can tell that all of them have such a high regard for like Bruce Lee's style, because Bruce Lee's films in the 70s, I mean, they really did popularize
Yeah.
like kung fu and martial arts. They broadened everything for Western audiences. And I really get the sense when you watch all these other more recent masters in martial arts who are making movies, like you can tell they have a deep respect for that, and that they always want to have something that will build off of what Bruce Lee did. And you can really see that, like when I watched Enter the Dragon again this last couple weeks, and then rewatch all these other movies as well, it was very much like you can see all these little elements that you can tell the writers were like, oh, we're doing this, and then all their martial arts masters were like, okay, so he hits him like that, I'm going to do something real similar to that, and that's going to be my paying homage or respect to Bruce Lee. I think that's so cool that you get that sense, especially from like Jackie Chan and Jet Li. You can tell greatly from them that they have such a high regard for what Bruce Lee set the stage for. I think it makes total sense for Enter the Dragon to be your number one. The only reason it's not super high on mine is just the nostalgia factor is so big for me usually.
Yeah.
And I connected with all these other movies a little bit more than I did with Enter the Dragon, but not by much. It's still in my top 10.
Yeah. So close.
But yeah, I think his stakes from an early on, right from the get-go, were always much higher. If you don't count like Green Hornet, which by the way, him and the Green Hornet, come on, that's just badass. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's right. Man, this episode's chock full of like random shit that we're bringing up. Hey.
That's true.
Well, my number one, I realized something. As much as I love the grittier, darker side of like martial arts movies or kung fu movies, I will always gravitate to the comedic side of it. And when you have a kung fu like guru dude who decides one day, I'm going to write a straight comedy kung fu movie, and I'm going to incorporate Looney Tunes style humor into this film. I am that audience that just like, well, this is going to be one of my favorite things of all time then. And it still stands as one of my all-time favorite. It is my number one. I thought it was going to be like at least number 3, maybe number 4. But after I watched it by myself and then watched it again with my daughter and then watched it again by myself after that, I'm like, nope. This movie is just everything I love about every kung fu movie there is, and everything that I loved growing up, which is slapstick physical comedy. Kung Fu Hustle is like my favorite thing. It's my number one movie. This movie is so ridiculous, and it's perfectly done with seriously, he incorporates Looney Tunes style comedy and imagery into like the mythos of kung fu with kung fu masters, the lore of they're always larger than life. They have these incredible abilities that have only been tapped through the use of kung fu. Some of it's used for good, some of it's used for bad. It's set in like the 1940s, 50s style. It is so freaking funny. And I gotta tell, when I showed my daughter the movie, I was like, all right, you've watched foreign films, right? So you're going to be able to read the subtitles. She was like, it's not English. Like they didn't dub it English. And I went, well, they do, but to get one of the best jokes in the whole movie, you have to watch the original language. She was like, why? I was like, because the joke's in English and it only works if you watch it in its original language. But like there were scenes in that movie where she was just rolling with laughter. And then the fight scenes are still really cool, even with all the Looney Tunes style and just doing all this like cartoony kung fu stuff. It works so well as they incorporate actual kung fu fight scenes and kind of like principles and mentality. I love Kung Fu Hustle so freaking much. It's so it's unreal how much I love this movie.
Yeah, it's the one I thought you were going to bring up when you were talking about the American or Beverly Hills Ninja, and I was like, this 100% probably will be on his list, but I was surprised it wasn't there. But yeah, I agree. It's one of those movies that is such a perfect satire of kung fu movies while also being a great kung fu movie. And that's always awesome when you are a great thing of the thing you are love, but also making fun of at the same time.
Yeah, I just even the super violence is the way they do it. Like you can tell, hey, all these characters have super high stakes. You know, they're trying to fight off the Axe Gang, who are pretty ruthless. They just murder people for the sake of murdering people. I mean, the opening scene is a guy getting murdered. So like they're high stakes, but then they add in like the humorous side. But then just as you're like, this movie can't get cartoony or like, this is just going to be a straight comedy, then you're introduced to the two assassins who, I forget the name of the instrument, but it's a string instrument, and they use that to create like their weapons. And that whole fight scene is actually kind of like crazy. Watching it with my daughter, she was like, Dad, I thought this was just funny. And I was like, don't worry, it'll get funny again. But it's full of just great, everything about Kung Fu Hustle is perfect. It really is. It's sad to say. So Stephen Chow, he did Shaolin Soccer, which I was never a big fan of Shaolin Soccer. It's like the Kung Fu soccer comedy. But Kung Fu Hustle is so well done and it's so perfect. I haven't really heard his name since Kung Fu Hustle came out, except for like, oh, he's kind of a pain in the ass to work with, so no one wants to work with him, and he just kind of dropped off. But I'm like, you know what? You make this. It was very successful, and people who have seen it love it. And if you're able to go out on top, I guess that's a way to go out. But
kind of a one and done as long as people forget about Shaolin Soccer.
Yeah, which I know there's some people that loved it. I just never got into Shaolin Soccer, but
I like Kung Fu movies more than I like soccer. That's probably why.
That's probably it. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. But yeah, so Kung Fu Hustle is my number one. The gags in that movie, I don't want to tell all the gags because you just have to watch them. They are great. I will say my favorite character in the whole movie is the landlady. She is a fucking gas. Oh my God. I love her so much. They do gags with like, not just her being this like crazy powerful landlady, but she's a satire on landlords. But then they throw in the whole gag of like slapping people with the flip flop. And that's just perfect. It's so good.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
Man,
I'm so glad that was on your list. That's a fun way to go out.
Yeah, it is.
I like it.
Honorable mentions, good sir?
Oh, yeah. I have too many to mention. I'll try to keep it brief. We've talked about a couple in the episode, so I'll skip those. But Armor of God, the other Jackie Chan series, both the original one and the sequel, Operation Condor, they're fun, different kind of as well, because it's like Indiana Jones with Kung Fu, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And Jackie Chan's really cool in it, obviously. It's an Ip Man movie, but it's not an Ip Man movie. It's not Donnie Yen. The Grand Master basically tells the same story as Ip Man, but in a different, cool way. I guess they were in production around the same time, but the Grand Master got delayed and didn't come out until later, partly because the main character who was playing the Grandmaster ended up sparring with an actual Wing Chun master and had his arm broken
Oh,
because
shit.
he was getting a little too big for his britches, I guess. So that's fun, but it's really cool. There's really cool shots, especially the opening at night with like the rain and stuff.
Okay.
It's one of the most iconic scenes ever. And apparently it took 40 nights to film it all.
Holy crap.
There's a giant fight in the rain at night, which is really cool. So The Grandmaster, a movie I'm going to mention for Kung Fu fans that I haven't seen, but I've wanted so badly to see. It's called The Street Fighter, and I've been meaning to try to find it. I just haven't gotten around to it. It's the first film to ever receive an X rating in the United States, strictly for violence. And so when it came out, a full 16 minutes were cut to get it down to an R rating. Since then, they have released like an uncut version on Blu-ray that I'm meaning to find. I think Shout Factory put it out, but it looks and sounds really cool. I've been meaning to find that. And then there's another really cool movie that you would probably like. A lot of people would like. It's called Chocolate, and it's like Rain Man with Muay Thai in it. With this lady, this girl is she has that like Rain Man thing going on, but is like a Muay Thai master also, and so it's a really interesting and cool movie.
All right.
Chocolate.
All right.
What about you?
Well, there was one that I watched a lot as a kid, but I couldn't make room on the 10 list for it, but it's actually a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
Yeah.
But Bloodsport, that one always stuck with me. That's a pretty intense film. The fight scenes are brutal. There is like nothing funny about anything in Bloodsport. But that movie, that was like really my introduction into like mixed martial arts fights and all that kind of stuff. That was when I started learning like, oh, this is a real thing, not just like in Hollywood, but these fights are like people do this shit. Insane.
I love Bloodsport as well. It's probably my favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
Yeah. A lot of people always bring up like Time Cop,
or Kickboxer.
Kickboxer is still pretty cool, but Bloodsport it hits a little different. I think that's him really hitting his stride personally. I also like, if you just want silliness, pure silliness, it doesn't matter if you watch the original from the 90s or the remake that came out last year. But Mortal Kombat, that straight kung fu fight, some of the fight scenes are pretty cool. It's fun. It's silly. It's bloody. Enjoy it. Don't go into it thinking it's going to be something real deep. It's not. It's just fight scenes. Tapped with some blood. First Strike with Jackie Chan, Operation Condor that we've brought up a couple times, Project A, check that one out. Mr. Nice Guy is awesome, where he's like the seeming innocent like chef who turns out to be this incredible martial artist. Really anything Jackie Chan, just go watch Jackie Chan. That I'd say like just go watch Jackie Chan.
Absolutely. Especially the ones he's directed.
Yeah. He's just, what an eye for that kind of stuff. It's so cool. It's so cool. And then all the ones that were not crossovers for us that like, I know I said a few times for you. And I had a couple too, but go check them out. You can skip. I will say this. If you go revisit Jet Li films, you can skip Romeo Must Die, but you can skip even more because it should have been amazing, and it turns out to just be one of the biggest piles of shit movies I have ever seen. It was I remember not liking it when it came out, but I thought, well, maybe time has passed. Maybe there's just something I missed in it that I'm going to enjoy now. And I rewatched it and was like, nope, this movie is just as bad as I remember. It's him and Jason Statham in War. That movie should have been cool. There should have been amazing fight scenes. It sucks. It's dumb. Skip it.
What was the one with DMX? Oh, Cradle to
the Grave. Yeah.
That one's like, there's so much nostalgia from 2003.
I remember it having
like,
some cool parts in it, but
Yeah.
it not being like super memorable.
Yeah.
Which sucks because Jet Li is so badass. So if you want to see him badass, go watch Unleashed, obviously. Or you can go back to America's introduction to him if you want just straight, like, super fast badassery. Go watch Lethal Weapon 4. That was our whole introduction to Jet Li. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say the director's cut of Fearless is a lot better than the theatrical cut of Fearless, if you like that style.
And
so he's good in that.
I did not get around to watching Fearless or Hero, but I really wanted to, and then I just ended up rewatching Beverly Hills Ninja and Kung Fu Hustle. And
as he should. Nothing wrong with that.
So that's it. Hey, it's not 4 hours.
You're welcome, audience. Unless you like that kind of thing.
Right.
But as we've talked about many times in this episode, we are old men who do not have the stamina anymore to do that. So we're like, let's keep this one a little bit reasonable.
Let's try and keep this reasonable.
Yeah, that was fun. We talked about it forever. I'm so glad we finally got around to doing it.
I'm so glad we did that. So homework for next week, we're doing another deep dive into a single film, not a full franchise, folks. So
spoiling the crap out of it.
Yeah.
So you need to watch it.
I'm excited for it because it's a movie that you hear generally people do not enjoy.
Yeah. Shit on a lot.
It gets shit on a lot, which when I watched it, I expected it to suck, and it blew me away the first time I watched it, and I have loved this movie ever since. It's way better than I think people expect. But
a lot more depth to it than people give it credit for. So I'm excited to talk about that.
I have theories on all that, but obviously that's next week. So we're going to deep dive into Sucker Punch. So
the Zack Snyder, one of his several disliked movies, but maybe the most disliked Zack Snyder movie.
Yeah, but we're going to dive into it, kind of go into like the deep meanings, our take is, and all that, like we usually do. But go watch it. I am planning on watching his cut of it, the extended version. I'm planning on it. Hopefully, hopefully it is here on time.
Nice. I planned that as well. I think I'll watch both the theatrical.
Yeah, I want to watch both.
Directors.
But that should be a fun one. The people that I have met that enjoy the movie really enjoy the movie. It's not just like a cool movie to them. They take a lot out of it. So I'm excited to dive into that. So
yeah, me too.
Go watch Sucker Punch, folks. And keep in mind, it's a lot deeper of a film than the just cool action film that the previews originally showed. Good job, marketing.
Right. Yeah. I think most people just dismissed it because they're like, oh, it's hot chicks in schoolgirl outfits. That's all it is. It's a boy. It's a, you know what it is. And you don't know what it is. It's a lot more than that.
So
yeah,
get ready for another Mindfuck week. We actually have a couple of those coming up, but that's for later.
Yeah, more to come on that.
Go buy some merch. Check us out on all the social stuff, and let us know your favorite kung fu's or your favorite Jackie Chan. Really, let's face it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Or kung fu movies that we should check out because I'm always up for new kung fu. I feel like I've seen all of them, and I love finding a new one that blows me away.
Yeah.
It happens.
It does
fairly often, but
so
let us know what we should see.
Do all that good stuff, and we will see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.